from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
When the world counts me out, I remind myself I'm great and amazing, gotta love myself. Silence the voices that say that I'm nothing. I know I'm something, and I shine.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, Black and Pink. Here to tell us more about this Omaha-based nonprofit organization is its executive director, Dominique Morgan. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm so excited to be here.
All right, Dominique, I want to start with the mission of this organization.
Yeah. We're looking at the intersections of folks who identify as LGBTQ+, folks who could be living with HIV and AIDS, and those are not mutually exclusive. Let's be clear about that. Those are two different populations of folks, sometimes it can cross over, who are currently and formerly incarcerated. And we use the term system impacted. It allows us to serve folks who are inside of institutions, folks who have been released, their children, their partners, and then even go broader and say that communities are impacted by systems. If someone was an owner of a business, if someone was the coach of the football team, if we have a student in a school and they're gone, it changes the experience of the folks who are there. It changes the community. And so it's a very holistic approach, and we use a transformative justice framework to do our services for folks locally and nationally.
Yeah, let's talk nationally. We have a map that we want to put up for our viewers. Talk about the chapters that you have sprinkled across the country.
Yeah, it's very unique with Black and Pink that I've been the executive director for 2 years now, and we've done large system-changing work with 98% volunteers. And so they run our chapters. So our chapters across the country will do issues based where they are at, but they will also sometimes coalesce and look at how we can change national movements. And we're so excited. We have about 8 chapters in queue right now that we're doing development of that will launch later this year.
Okay, and I want to talk a little bit about the acronym that you mentioned earlier. I want to put the graphic up for our viewers with this acronym. Walk us through those letters, Dominique, and what they mean.
So most folks have seen, heard, and depending on what generation you're in, kind of grown up with the LGBTQ portion, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. I think currently we're delving deeper into the experience of trans people. Queer and questioning, when we look at the term queer, I would compare it to when folks use people of color as more of an umbrella term to talk about brown and Black folks. Anyone who doesn't identify as white. When I use queer in presentations and work and just in most social situations, it's really an umbrella term to build space for community for folks who may still fall into the intersections, right? So you look at this acronym that feel like large buckets, and there are gonna be folks that are gonna be in between those buckets, but queer is if it's raining outside, and you know you get the big heavy drops of rain, right? That's what I would call lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans. But those sprinkles will mess up your hair as well, right? Those intersections, we still want them to make sure that the umbrella is covered from that. So that's the queer piece of it. I don't, and most folks really don't look into questioning because we look at sexuality, gender, and presentation as a spectrum. So if you are navigating the spectrum, that's not so much of you questioning or being unsure. That's an exploration, which I feel is a human right. The identity of Two-Spirit is really predates any other identity, because the Two-Spirit identity is attached to the indigenous population, so the Native Americans. And it's the belief, and it wasn't based on sexuality, it was the belief that when Native folks are born or come into this world, they're given the tools they need to support and impact their tribe, their community. And folks who are Two-Spirit, the belief is that they're given both sets of tools of male and female, and oftentimes are exalted, put in positions of leadership, royalty in spaces with the Two-Spirit identity. So that's more cultural and specific to indigenous and Native populations.
What is important, in your opinion, Dominique, for people to know about the groups that you've just described?
I think it's important to understand that we are all community in some way. I think folks feel like you have to love a person, you have to know a person's name to acknowledge the fact that we are all interconnected as people. That's what society is about. And even in the spaces where I don't understand, I don't get it, my religion may say that it's inappropriate, all the values. My work isn't about changing someone's values. It's about affirming your values and creating a space where you can affirm mine as well. And when we look at folks at these intersections, they're still our family. They're still our community. I'm a proud Nebraskan, right? And I know some folks would say, well, I don't know him. This is my state, this is my city, and I don't have to know your name to think that. So I really want folks to drive and lean into building community, even when you're unsure or maybe disagree with community. There's still a way to love and lean into each other. That's why we use the term family with Black and Pink. They're our family. Why? At the kitchen table, you can argue with your sister, but you still love your sister, right? How do we disagree? How do we have conflict sometimes and still have love and respect?
Driven in part by your own life experiences, right, Dominique?
Absolutely.
At 14, I understand you came out to your family and friends as gay.
Yes.
Difficult, I would imagine. Take us back to that time. What do you remember?
For me, it was, and I'm born and raised here in Omaha, Nebraska. I grew up in North Omaha specifically, and I think looking back, thinking that the conversations about the identities, then you add race onto those identities. So I had possibly seen some queer folks, LGBT identified folks on TV. I'm of that Sally Jesse Raphael generation, but I had not seen any folks of color. Black people who identified as such. And so being young and Black and growing up in a very Black neighborhood and community, seeing amazing people like Ernie Chambers and Brenda Council and all these folks, I had never seen anyone who looked like me who had my identities. So it was difficult, not so much oppressive of parents or anything. It was, how do I conceptualize what I'm feeling and who do I think I am? Because I've never seen anything like that media community in general. And it was a struggle for me, which led me into group homes, which led me into foster care, suspension, expulsion. I was a young person who had experienced harm by sexual violence at a young age. And so all of these things really culminated to me homeless at 17, engaging in about 6 months of survival crimes that then positioned me to enter the Nebraska Department of Corrections.
How did you make it day to day amidst all of that? I mean, you're able to tell the story today, but back then, I mean, how did you get from one day to another?
Sometimes it was minute to minute. I especially think back during my times of solitary confinement where it's very interesting. I was looking at my calendar the other day and someone was asking me, what are you doing in September? And I'm like, yo, you should have asked me about September like 6 months ago, because I'm already thinking about 2021 inside how slow time goes. And there were some days where it was like, I got to get through the next 20 minutes. I'm going to get through the next hour. Okay, this day is done. We're gonna see how we get through the next day, and it slowly builds. But it was a approach of, I just have to make it, and the belief that, which I carry with me today, is that you always get to start over tomorrow. If it's rough today, make it through tomorrow. You get to start over, and that's something I held on to as well.
Wow! And you found music.
Yeah.
To be an outlet or a source of hope.
Absolutely.
Talk about your introduction to music and how that helped that helped with all the experiences that you were having at that time?
I had always been interested in music. I had really started writing like words and kind of verses when I was like 7 or 8. And I sang all through high school and did musicals and really was impassioned again, but I had not seen a queer person who was like a popular musician in R&B and soul, so it just didn't really feel attainable and or accessible. And so when I went into solitary confinement, I was trying to find things to just keep my mind busy, reading books and things, and I kept getting to the end of a book and like pages would be gone. And so I would get so frustrated in like investing in a book and missing that I was like, I'm just gonna I started writing the songs that I sang in high school from show choir, just like writing out the lyrics just to keep my mind busy. And there was a day where I heard this melody, because I had always assumed people wrote songs to music. I hadn't seen or I had an understanding that folks can feel music and all those things that we know now. And I wrote my first song, and it was in solitary confinement. I wrote about 300 songs, a little over 300 songs in those 18 months in solitary. And again, that was more about just finding peace, putting words out there, the things that I was feeling. It was really my therapy. And I had no expectation that now I would be 4 albums in, a Christmas album, touring nationally, winning awards for my music, when at the time it was just about just kind of saving my mind and keeping me afloat.
Wow. So when did you, I mean, when you're writing the music, I guess I'm curious in terms of the support that maybe you received, the encouragement. You've talked a little bit about life behind bars, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But did you get any support or encouragement of things that interested you while you were there?
There were, so my biggest support were the other folks who were incarcerated with me. It's interesting to be trying to survive yourself and watching other people survive. It was interesting for me to have my way of knowing really challenged, because although I was incarcerated, I went into that system leaning into classism and believing that the worst decision that a person makes, like that encapsulates their whole experience. And I would meet people like, there's this gentleman named Arch Kirby, and Arch has to be about 90 years old now. But to watch this elder gentleman get up every day and go work in the laundry, and to know that he has a life sentence and be the sweetest person, to reach out and ask you if you needed something. And so it really forced me to look at, I was looking at privilege before I had the language of looking at my power and privilege. And it was those people who loved on me and leaned into me. There were definitely caseworkers and staff who I was close to, and I've connected to them again. I think one of the biggest realizations of that is Judge Elizabeth Serkovich. She was my juvenile judge. And there was so much in that experience of my juvenile experience. Flash forward 20-some years, I'm heading to Georgetown to go to school, and there's a list of my classmates, and it's Judge Serkovich. And we spend a week talking and learning and crying sometimes, looking at what's it like to be someone who works in the system and what's it like to be someone who's navigated the system, and like our evolutions and how folks sometimes don't see either side. And now she's someone who I think is one of my closest friends. So that's a long answer to say it's a little bit of everyone. And also, I had to really start loving myself. If I look back at my time in prison, the isolation forced me to no longer run from me. And there's a gift in that, absolutely.
Yeah, I was gonna say, for what an experience like that takes from you, it also gives if you're open
Absolutely.
to receiving. So what would you say, Dominique, was the greatest life lesson in all of that?
Really, my biggest life lesson that came out of that was that nothing can kill me but death. I assumed that I was not strong. I remember the day that I was put into the solitary confinement, so I'm like, I'm not gonna make it through the day, because being alone scared me so very much. And a week went, and 6 months went, and seasons went, and a birthday went, and I walked out there, I'm like, okay, I survived this. I came out of prison, I was like, okay, I'm still standing. I was 6 months into my prison sentence when my father died, and went through that in there. And then I came home in February of 2009, and my mother died in December of 2009. And so that's what it taught me, is that I focus on thriving now, but it helped me identify and lean into my resilience. and respect and like really feel affirmed and strong in that. And I'm forever appreciative of knowing that I'm battle tested.
So the day you walked out,
Yes.
you said February 2009. What can you tell us about that day? It was almost 9 years.
Well, it'll be 11 years on Sunday.
But that you served,
yes,
right? You
almost
served
nine.
almost 9 years.
Absolutely.
So what must it be like to walk out after that long, given the experiences that you've shared and those we will never know about, to finally be free?
It was a Sunday, and so most things were closed anyway. And I was in Lincoln, and I remember that I just was excited to walk down the street and the wind to like just really hit my face, and it was oddly warm. I had never been to a Walmart before, and so I remember I walked and I wanted to see what a Walmart was like. And then I was in Lincoln and I had to catch the bus home and getting car sick because I hadn't moved around really in years. And those are the things that I think about the most of that day is like the wind, like the fluorescent lights of Walmart, and this idea that you can shop for everything in one store, like that just kind of blew my mind. And then being car sick, which just didn't make sense, and using a cell phone. I had to call my mom to let her know that I was coming home, and this woman just handed me her phone. I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. Yeah. I had a little sack that had my songs in it. I had 2 weeks of medication, and I had some deodorant. And now we're 11 years later, and I can't imagine not having half of my house in my work bag every day. So it's been a huge shift, a learning shift of learning who I am and how I hold space. But also, to go back to what you said, the beauty of that for me is that the work that I do now, I'm able to influence that based off of really knowing what that experience is like.
Well, I was going to say, you come out of something like that. Anytime somebody comes out of something that challenging, you have a couple choices. Yeah. You can give up and throw in the towel and say, you know what, life beat me, and I'm going to go and just do the best I can. Or you can get up and try again. And so when you were out, then you became an advocate, and you started down that path. Tell us, you go from the February date, 2009, and that journey. Talk a little bit about that journey into advocacy that led you where you are today.
So honestly, it was an approach and a belief that I had went through some restorative justice sessions inside of the prison. And now being a professional and knowing how the work should look, the classes really framed this mindset that I had done so much harm to people and like I had so much to fix. And so when I was released, it was like, okay, advocates, people who work in the community, they give. I had taken so much, I'm gonna give, because I wanted to balance the scale. And it was maybe 6 months after I was released, I was volunteering at a Heartland Pride event. I was doing sign-in at the table because I wanted free tickets to Pride. I would end up then being the president of the organization and starting Youth Pride here in Nebraska. But there was a woman next to me who was working, she was getting paid. And I said, I know you went to school for something to do this, what did you study? And she said, I studied public health. And so I went home that day, I went online to Southern New Hampshire University's website and I signed up for public health classes. And I was like, I don't know what's gonna come of this, but this feels right. Started volunteering, sitting on boards, like learning the tactical day-to-day work of really running nonprofits. I had a associate's degree in culinary management when I got out of prison, so I was waiting tables and catering, going to school at night. And then slowly my name grew in the work based on my consistency and my passion for it. And then, I started at Charles Drew Health Center. And a year later, I thought I would be at Charles Drew for a long time, and then Black and Pink kind of approached me and offered me the position, and I said, absolutely.
They kind of approached you. So talk about that kind of approach. How were you discovered, and then what happened from there?
So the summer of 2017, I had been offered the job, but at the time you had to move to Boston, where the offices had been for about 12 years at that point. And I'm a Nebraska kid through it. I love Omaha, I love my state, seriously. And I'm like, I don't really want to move. And I really loved what I was doing at Charles Drew. And so I was like, no, I'll join the board of directors. Did not read the rules and bylaws of the board of directors, and it says that if there is not a current executive director, the president of the board of directors is the interim director. So we had hired someone, they did not work out, and I became the executive director interim. And I did the job for about 60 days, flying back and forth from Omaha to Boston, still working at Charles Drew, and I was like, I can do this, and also, why do I need to be in Boston? We have specific issues in here in Nebraska. We're a national organization. Being in the heart of the country, I think, is powerful. I was like, I will take the job full time if I'm able to move our offices here to Omaha. And we have a national board, and sight unseen, they had never been to Omaha, said yes. And here we are 2 years later.
So what changes have you seen as a result of bringing the organization to Omaha? It's a loaded question, but what have you seen in terms of maybe that ripple effect?
It's loaded, but I would narrow it down to like it's really reciprocal. So you have people who love Black and Pink because the national work that they've done, that we've done, and the impact we have. And I have staff all across the country that then report to me. So you have the outside now looking to Nebraska because, oh, Black and Pink's in Omaha. And then you have this ability of us being a national nonprofit that's based in Omaha, so we're able to be thought leaders nationally and say that we are based here and influence the work here. And I think that's what excites me the most, is the opportunity to have these reciprocal experiences.
Okay, and one of the biggest projects that you have done, take us to 2014, and we're going to put up a graphic for our viewers so they can take a look at it, but it was kind of a survey that you did. Talk about that.
So when you do data for folks who write grants or folks who, just like, what's the climate? You need data for that. One of the largest barriers for people who are currently incarcerated is that they're under a protected class, under IRB approval. So a lot of people don't want to do this. So Black and Pink hand sent in these surveys. They hand tallied these. And then the folks who responded decided who got the information. And it was really a change maker. There are students and universities today that sent me an email asking, can we cite this in our research? Can we use this to decide what type of programs we want to have? And it's very unique because these are the voices of folks who are in these systems right now. And that's rare for us to get that.
Wow, biggest surprise in your opinion that came out of that, or maybe something that came out of it that you said, now we're going to town with this?
I think the biggest surprise was this fear of people not getting access to health care when they were released. It's that people are so afraid that they're not going to have the services once they're released, they're not engaging in the services inside. Because it's, why am I going to do this here when it won't be available when I get outside? And coming from a public health background, a sexual health background, that really spoke to me and said, well, this is something we can really work on and address, because we have amazing professionals. Omaha specifically, we have wonderful projects like the Adolescent Health Project that we can really bring folks who are currently and formerly incarcerated to these wonderful professionals, and that's something I've really pushed for the last 2 years.
Okay. Other successes, we just have a few minutes remaining. Tell us about some of the other successes of Black and Pink.
I would honestly say the largest success is that we are launching a housing initiative called Leiden House. The founder of Black and Pink, his name is Jason Leiden. And so we named the houses for Jason. And when I came home, I luckily had my mother to go home to. But there are so many people who don't have a place to go home to. There are people who have parole but can't leave the prison because they can't get an address approved. And so I wanted to create homes. Not transitional, not halfway houses. And so the first Leiden House ribbon cutting is Sunday. We're breaking ground for our youth space in April of this year. And if I had to look at a legacy piece of what I've brought to the organization, I would say that. So I'm so excited to get folks in these homes, support them, and have a multitude of people who have come out of the system and are very successful.
Wow. So that's a little bit about the future of present and future of Black and Pink. What about you, Dominique? What's your future like?
My future is, I have a book coming out this year that's focusing on supporting youth who are in the system around their sexual health. I have an album that is coming out this year of the songs that I wrote in solitary confinement. We put them in an opera last year. I'll be going to Chicago this summer to record the album with the orchestra. My life story will be coming out in 2021 in book form. We're working on a musical based on my experience on the inside. And vacations and loving myself and enjoying the blessing of being free and being able to bring freedom and liberation to other people.
One of the things that you have talked about in presentations is the word resilience. So as we close this interview a little bit, I want to ask you, why is that word so important to you, and what do you want our viewers to know about it?
I believe resilience is important because you should always acknowledge when people have survived something. My fear with resilience is that so many people stay in survival mode. And so when I talk about resilience, because then I want to talk about thriving. The work that I'm doing, the work that we are doing as people in this community, the first step is to engage in the resilience of the people that we serve. But the ultimate goal is to be doing work to where people can engage in spaces where they are thriving. So acknowledge the folks around you who are resilient, love them, appreciate them, celebrate them, and then pivot and say, how can I help you thrive? And if we're doing that, we will have the sort of community that I know we can have.
One of the things you mentioned earlier was learning about yourself in solitary confinement, and it really does have to start with us. In the minute we have remaining, those viewers who are watching and saying, my gosh, he's amazing, but you know, that's him. How can that be the viewer watching?
It is them already. I am not a singular story. You need to take the time and look at your power. I use the term superpowers. We are all a part of the Avengers of the community. There's the Hulk who can lift a building, and there's a person on this that doesn't even have superpowers. They just have a pistol, right? But they stand there together, they fight the same demons, and they are equally needed. You are equally needed in this work, and you have a superpower. Just look into it, and if you get too lost, you can email me and we can have a chat, and I'll see if I can help you find it.
You are very inspirational. I want to put up a couple of websites for our viewers in case they want to learn more about what we've been talking about today. There is blackandpink.org, and then DominiqueMorgan.com. Dominique, thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your time and your stories. Best wishes to you and everybody involved moving forward.
Thank you.
All right, thanks to our students who are working so hard behind the scenes, and of course to our viewers for watching. As we close, a look at the Benson area as seen through the lens of Grace Bellinghouse, a junior here at UNO. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at netnebraska.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.